New COVID-19 cases in the country continue a downward slide as 288 new infections are reported on Monday. Retail giant ShopRite debunks rumors of leaving Nigerian market. In international news, more families squatting in unused buildings in Brazil as COVID-19 hastens evictions. And in sport, Confederation of African Sports (CAF) unveils first ever plan to develop women's football.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Nigerians are beginning to heave a sigh of relief as COVID-19 cases continue a downward spiral for a second day this week. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control confirmed 288 new cases of infections and 8 COVID-19 related deaths on Monday. This raises the overall total to 44,129. Nearly half of those cases have been discharged, with nearly 900 deaths recorded across the country. Lagos leads with 88 of the new cases, Kwara follows with 33, Osun 27, and the Federal Capital Territory 25. The Federal Inland Revenue Service is urging Nigerians to pay their taxes. FIRS Executive Chairman Muhammad Nami says Nigeria's economy is being sustained by taxes, not by oil revenues, even in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. Nami says tax revenues have played a great role in financing parts of allocations shared by states. The FIRS board made this comment during a television public enlightenment appearance to educate citizens on voluntary tax compliance, including stamp duty payments, which he says have increased from 18 billion naira to a current level of around 80 billion naira. He implored outlets that collect the taxes to remit them to the government so the impact of oil revenue bust would be minimized. The Maize Farmers Association of Nigeria says it has secured a 16 billion naira facility from the Central Bank of Nigeria to shore up maize farming in the country. This became necessary after the federal government banned importation of maize. Correspondent Kelechi Mekalam reports.
Another planting season for maize farmer Abubakar Sabitu. He has spent the past 2 decades cultivating maize, a staple food widely consumed in Nigeria. But lots of farmers like himself haven't enjoyed favorable yields and sales. Besides contending with imports, financing has been a major challenge. Now the Apex Bank's ban on maize importation and its $41.2 million credit facility to maize farmers would help boost production.
The challenges I face every farming season is access to fertilizer, because each year we farm, we have a budget for fertilizer. But most years, there is always a hike in the price, and it affects our calculation due to the price differences. This makes us to always seek financial help, and in some cases, the fertilizer is not readily available.
If part of this money will be used to acquire tractors and some machines, that will make our work easier and encourage us to do more and will go a long way. If I was farming 1 hectare and I now have these inputs available, I can farm up to 10 hectares.
According to Nigeria's Bureau of Statistics, maize seed imports alone was over $4.6 million in the first quarter of 2019. And that's excluding other byproducts from maize running into millions of dollars. The Apex Bank hopes to stimulate economic recovery, safeguard rural livelihoods, and increase job opportunities affected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's the right step in the right direction. And don't forget, it's only for this season. You also go to have dry season farmers. There are also high exportable ones that we are already exporting, like sesame seed, shea butter, ginger. Those we are not even mentioned, but we are exporting those. So they require equal attention. So these ones are where Nigeria has significant comparative advantage compared to other African countries. And so we need to put resources behind those.
About 40,000 maize farmers will access the credit facility. Among other interventions, the funds would go into agro inputs like fertilizers, seeds, and agrochemicals. The farmers are expected to double their output this year, as well as provide 1.5 million metric tons of maize for animal feed.
Retail giant ShopRite, which has been in the Nigerian marketplace for 15 years now, has debunked rumors it was planning to leave Nigeria. Stories began flooding the social media on Monday that ShopRite has decided to leave the country because of a series of problems in doing business in Nigeria. But country director for Chasters Consults, Eni Achibong, told the newspaper in Lagos ShopRite is staying in Nigeria. He said all the company had done was to open up investment opportunities in the country to Nigerians. He said the company would not exit the country where it has a $30 billion investment. If the report had been true, more than 2,000 Nigerians would have lost their jobs. Coming up, African stories. Ugandan transport operators, especially commercial motorbike riders, face strict COVID-19 enforcement. And later, international news. COVID-19 is forcing more Brazilian families to squat in abandoned buildings as COVID-19 hastens evictions.
You are watching ANN. Somewhere in the world, every second of the day, news is happening. And of course, Nigeria is bustling with news day and night. That is why ANN doesn't sleep. Our eyes are peeled, wide open, so no story escapes our radar. We stay abreast of world events and happenings at home. We keep you up to the minute in the world of sports. We give you information to stay on top of your investments and all the hard facts you'll need to navigate your day. If you miss us on air, you can keep up to date on our website and on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. We are ANN, Africa News Network. We do news right in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Public transport operators in Uganda are under the watchful eyes of the authorities, as many of them are set to disregard the government's COVID-19 preventive guidelines. As Leon Sionj reports, motorcycle taxi drivers are faulted the most.
As Uganda eases its COVID-19 lockdown restrictions, the country's transport sector remains under tight supervision. Motorbike taxis, also known as border borders, must follow strict measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. Each rider is required to wear a mask and carry a temperature gun. The government is concerned that many operators are flaunting the regulations.
There's been a lot of abuse, unfortunately, that people are not wearing face masks. The border operators themselves are not putting on face masks, and even the passengers are not putting on face masks. Now, this may result like what we saw with the trans-cargo drivers. At one time, they became the source of infection. Now, if the border industry also moves unguardedly in that direction, then it will soon become the source of infection. And so we should not be shocked if we are to go back in a lockdown.
Riders must also keep a register of all passengers they carry and their telephone contacts.
I've asked my passengers for their documents because it's what is required of us to do now. Many just go away and you cannot insist on taking them.
Not all motorbike taxi users have warmed up to registering every time they are to take a ride. They say writing their details with every rider is giving away too much about themselves. They are worried that could put them in harm's way.
We definitely have to worry. these national ID numbers or our telephone numbers can be used to track you on anything. We have to be concerned.
Motorbike taxis are an easy mode of transport to get around, with some passengers comfortable to once again use the motorbike taxis during this pandemic. The riders are keen to remain on the road.
If I have my helmet and my mask, and the passenger too has their face shield. Some passengers carry sanitizers. They even spray the money they give us.
The government is tightly regulating the operations of motorbike taxis. The establishment of free zone areas for riders to operate is likely to keep Muwereza and 1,000 others out of the central business district.
The COVID-19 pandemic is changing the faces of many sectors globally. In Kenya, the face of education is changing as schools remain shuttered to curtail the spread of the pandemic. As Nick Modimba reports, homeschooling is gaining roots in the country as parents take the bull by the horn to ensure their children get the education they need.
Bassem Loukil is the founder and CEO of Loukil Group. It is one of the leading car importers in Tunisia and North Africa. He says that sales have stopped for almost 10 weeks. Consequently, stocks in some car segments are very low because the supply chain was abruptly broken during the months of March, April and May. Loukil says that access to credit is extremely limited while the cost is really high.
Today, in order to really pull this segment of the economy out of its crisis and stagnation, we really need to look at some special measures. One, to help consumers fight the price increases, and that will be by reducing or eliminating the 15% consumer tax. Why not revising the VAT from 19.3% to maybe 12% in order to compensate the increase in price due to the devaluation of the Tunisian dinar.
Most European manufacturers make and buy their car components in Tunisia. This vital industry, which employs more than 63,000 people, has also been greatly affected by the coronavirus crisis.
Our exports of car parts to Europe total 1 billion euros per year. And therefore, in order to maintain that growth and maintain that exchange with the European car manufacturers, we also need to look at how we can entice sales and maintain at least a minimum of 42 or 40,000 new car sales per year.
The president of the National Union for the Import and Sale of Cars in the North African nation says that if the crisis persists, the whole industry could be devastated in the next few months.
The
COVID-19 crisis has devastated the automotive sector. The sales are the lowest in decades. Only 118 cars were sold in May for all car importers. We've lost over 90% of our activity. This is unprecedented.
Tunisian car importers are calling on the ministries of trade and finance to give incentives to car dealers in order to preserve existing jobs and to limit the impact of the coronavirus crisis.
Experts assert that with fewer people likely traveling over the summer vacation period due to the pandemic, as well as the low purchasing power due to the economic crisis, car sales could slump even further if the state does not support car importers and consumers.
We apologize for that mix-up. Now, Senegal has renamed a place on the island of Gorée, known for centuries to have served as a stopover in the transatlantic slave trade. Authorities have unanimously adopted a draft deliberation on the name change during a city council meeting in late June. This decision was inspired by recent Black Lives Matter events around the globe. The name Place de la Europe has now been changed to Place de la Liberté and et de Dignité Humaine. Mayor of the municipality of the island of Gorée, Augustin Senghor, said because the World Heritage Site, which he describes as the symbol of the suffering of black men in general, crystallizes all the memory of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery, this name change has to be done. Many say the previous name was inappropriate because of the history of the island's slavery. Residents of the island of Guri have approved the name change. No inauguration date has yet been set because of the coronavirus pandemic. When we return, international news. COVID-19 is forcing more Brazilian families to squat in abandoned buildings as COVID-19 hastens evictions. And later, sports. CAF unveils first ever plan to develop women's football.
You are watching ANN.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow this story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. There has been a spike in unemployment across the world, courtesy of COVID-19. In Brazil, the pandemic has led to a housing emergency as newly evicted people with nowhere else to go have now turned to squatting in unused buildings. Correspondent Paulo Cabra reports that those buildings are now also under threat of being razed by authorities.
Just a few months ago, as COVID-19 began to spread across Brazil, this was mostly empty land, with just a few dozen shacks on its edges. Now there are 840 families living here in the area they call Jardim Julieta, in São Paulo's northern suburbs. Some 200 more families are on a waiting list, organized by occupation leaders. This is public land belonging to the city of São Paulo, but left unused for many years.
I'm working here helping other people to set up their shacks because life is hard. People need a place to live and this one was all abandoned.
The housing deficit is an old and severe problem in São Paulo, now made worse with the rise in unemployment caused by the COVID-19 pandemic.
We have received many reports of families who were evicted because they could not pay rent, including families that were renting homes in shanty towns or even paying to live in other squatted areas. So these evictions gave rise to new occupations in the city of São Paulo.
The United Nations asked Brazil to halt all evictions during the pandemic, and here in São Paulo, prosecutors also asked the mayor for a temporary halt on evictions, including this place, Jardim Julieta. After losing their jobs because of COVID-19 lockdowns, many workers built shacks for their families here after getting evicted. But city authorities say this area has now to be cleared, ironically, for the construction of affordable housing.
A court order obtained by the city has given families here until August 7th to live willingly. Despite the risk of losing everything, many are working to quickly upgrade their wooden shacks into brick houses, in a strategy to make evicting them more difficult. This family arrived a couple of months ago after being evicted for not paying their rent. Now they are afraid to lose again the precarious roof they at least have over their heads.
Depois da pandemia, eu não achei mais serviço, né?
Since the beginning of the pandemic, I could not find work anymore. I built this with the emergency grant money paid by the government, but now that's all gone too. If they tell us to leave, where can I go with my daughters? I don't have relatives here in São Paulo to stay with.
With cases of COVID-19 still surging in Brazil, authorities continue to advise people to stay at home as much as they can. A tough challenge for those forced to live on the fringes of society and struggling to hang on.
Another two-week total lockdown begins today, Tuesday, in the Philippines. President Rodrigo Duterte says this is necessary because the country is struggling to contain virus cases that have jumped to more than 100,000. Some of the president's allies have advised against the new lockdown, saying it could cripple the already ailing economy. Reports say the lockdown will affect an estimated 25 million people, almost a quarter of the Philippines' population of more than 100 million. Melbourne is fighting a second wave of coronavirus infections. Authorities say the best way to curb a further spread of the virus is to shut down shops, factories, and other non-essential businesses. Other measures include a nighttime curfew for the city's 5 million residents. At least 1 million workers will stay at home. Until recently, Australia's efforts to curb the virus had improved, but an outbreak in Victoria pushed the nation back to its worst point. Victoria alone recorded more than half of the country's total cases of 18,215 deaths. Authorities say the only valid reasons for leaving home during the curfew hours would be for work, medical care, or caregiving. Up next, sport. Confederation of African Football, CAF, unveils first ever plan to develop women's football. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In sport, Confederation of African Football, CAF, now has a proper 4-year strategy until 2020 to chart the way forward for the women's game. The 4-year blueprint was developed by top stakeholders at a workshop in Egypt. Correspondent Adu El Marouki has the details.
CAF has developed a strategy aimed at taking women's football in Africa to new heights. The plan, a first of its kind, has 5 pillars and will stretch until 2023. Under the slogan, "It's time, it's now," CAF stressed the urgency of women's football development.
It is the most important decision made by CAF this year. The slogan they chose was realistic. It is truly the time to change the status quo in women's football. FIFA is injecting $1 billion for women's football, and that surely is an amount that can change a lot, especially in Africa.
CAF aims to develop the talent of current women players while hunt for new ones among young girls in schools. The organization will be looking to expand women competitions. It will start from an under-15 category, beginning with zonal titles, then move to a continental level. Meanwhile, CAF will launch the Women's Champions League.
The timing is perfect. Yes, the move to support women in the sport is a bit late, but many African associations are now more ready than ever. We are now seeing a Women's CAF Champions League, and that is huge.
CAF wants to create a globally appealing brand for African women's football. Work has already commenced, and many national associations are now tasked with developing their own plan to accelerate the development of women's football.
We've started with our development program. We're working to spread football among girls in schools. Starting next year, there will be bonus education points given as incentives for students who practice a sport. All public youth centers are now establishing women teams. We've also trained referees. We've introduced futsal and beach football to women. We want to empower women. We don't want football to only be a hobby for women. We want it to become a profession.
The vision was announced in line with the efforts to empower women and expand their social impact. So CAF will be looking to see more women appointed in football administrations across Africa. The Egyptian capital has hosted the first ever women's football task force last November. FIFA then has sent a team from its women division to help CAF draft its strategy. The continental governing body is now relying heavily on zonal unions and national associations to implement its ambitious plan.
That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.